Hello, Year 8. How are you today and how is everybody doing? Okay, so today's going to be grammar from the literacy book. So the first two pages, pages 13 and 14, are from your student book, and the exercise, page 11 and 12, are from your workbook. Okay, this is from your workbook. All right, so I'm just going to touch up a little bit on the active and passive because I'm going to be talking about and explaining it in more detail in the grammar lesson, inshallah. But in general, the voice of the verb is the relationship between the subject and the verb. So we have active voice and we have passive voice. English has two voices, active and passive. The active voice is when the subject of the verb is responsible for the action of the verb. So the subject does the action. For example, the teacher chose Sonita to be form captain. Sonita to be form captain. In this sentence, the teacher is the subject of the verb chose and Sonita is the direct object. The teacher does the action of the verb, so the verb is in the active voice. However, suppose we turn the sentence around like this. Sunita was chosen by the teacher to be form captain. Now this sentence is passive voice. What happened here? It says, then Sunita, the subject, is not responsible for the action indicated by the verb, but has the action done to her. Now here our subject has the action done to it, right? She is said to suffer the action of the verb. So the verb here the verb is in the passive voice. In this example of a passive sentence, the teacher, who was the subject of the active sentence, is known as the agent. Okay, so Sunita is still the subject. In the first sentence, the subject was teacher, right? In the first sentence, the subject was teacher. But in the second sentence, the teacher turned into what we call an agent, and now our subject is Sunita. Okay, so you have two sentences. The teacher chose Sunita. Teacher subject chose verb, Sunita object. When it flipped over, it says Sunita was chosen by the teacher. Sunita subject has action done to it, and then you have was chosen with your verb, and now your teacher is called an agent, okay? Usually, only transitive verbs, that is verbs followed by an object, can be changed from the active to the passive voice, because as you can see in the example above, it is the object of the active sentence that becomes the subject of the sentence. All right, so you need an object in your active sentence to be able to change your object into your subject. Because in sentence number 1, Sunita was the object, and in sentence number 2, Sunita became your subject, right? Examples of transitive verbs are, for example, the verb bring. If I say, can you bring, then I have to say, can you bring some coffee, for example. I can't just say bring and stop. But then you have intransitive verbs, like if I say, the girl jumped, I don't need an object here, right? Okay, now let's move on to infinitives. The infinitives of a verb are nearly always indicated by the word to. For example, to do, to eat, to be. These are examples of the present infinitive of the active form of the verb and are the terms used to describe These examples are the present infinitive of the active form of the verb and are the terms used to describe or name these verbs. Here's another example. The verb to text did not exist 30 years ago. To text. You will also come across forms of infinitive that correspond to the passive voice. For example, to be done, to be eaten. Now, to do is active. To be done is passive. To eat is active. To be eaten is passive. These examples are the present infinitive of the passive form of the verb. The verb to be cannot be done in the passive form. There are also different forms of infinitive in the past tense. So we have the examples that we looked at were present. Now, what if we have past? For example, to have done. Okay, this is past active. Past active, the example of past active is to have done. But a past passive would become to have been done. You see? Similarly, you have future infinitive, right? So you say about to do, this is active, the passive would be about to be done. Okay? Don't let it confuse you. The idea is actually very simple. Older books of English usage insist that when an infinitive is used, no word should be placed between the to and the rest of the infinitive. Breaking this rule, as in to boldly go, is known as splitting an infinitive. It is better to avoid splitting an infinitive, but doing so may produce something that sounds ugly. In this case, it is usually considered perfectly permissible to use a split infinitive, and it certainly will not be marked as incorrect by the examiners, all right? So we've spoken about active and passive, we've spoken about infinitives in their different tenses and in their active and passive form, and now we're going to vocabulary. Now we have slang words. Slang is informal language, quite often characteristic to a particular group of people, such as teenagers. It is not considered appropriate for formal occasions because it will be understood only by those who are part of the group that uses it. Slang also tends to date very early, meaning it changes very quickly. Slang this month or this year could be different from the one next year, okay? Although being aware of the latest slang terms is useful when you are talking in English to people of your own age group, it should be avoided when you are writing in any formal way. Now, the main difference between slang and colloquial is that slang is more informal than colloquial. Colloquial is more of day-to-day language than slang is. Slang is particular to specific groups, as has already been mentioned. Now, this is an exercise that you should solve. You have the slang terms, and I want you to think of basically match. Think of what each slang term means. This is regarding vocabulary, but for the active and passive, this is the exercise that you should solve. All right, this is it for this lesson. Thank you very much. If anybody has any question, I am right here. Thank you, year 8.